Good, good morning.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
EZ, good to see you, brother.
How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Ready to rock and roll?
Yep. Trying to get loose.
As usual, prepared for
Mhm.
liftoff.
Yep. Finna get loose.
Good morning. Good morning. You guys have everything that y'all need. Y'all have the session guide and all that, the session prep doc and all that stuff. Good stuff.
I got that. Thank you for sending that over to me.
No problem. And then Dr. Hewitt, she's gonna be logging on like right at like 10:30, just because she's coming from another meeting. And then Dr. T, the news panel, she'll be on like right before 11.
Okay,
Just because she had to switch some stuff around.
excellent. I'm glad she could join us.
Okay, so we have Dr. Hewitt. She's first. She's first in our question flow right here.
Yeah, you saw the updated question flows, right? This morning. That I sent last night.
Okay, hold on. I have this right here. The first A being what does volunteerism mean to you? And what do you think what role equity plays in
Yeah.
volunteerism? That one?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're we're going by that instead of this other piece where you have Dr. Hewitt going first, correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
I just want.
we're
Yeah,
doing away with this. Okay.
yeah. I just wanted to make it flow more where we're not just asking one person questions.
Gotcha.
Just make sure.
And I'm directing these questions to whose name I see in parentheses.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm I'm making you a panelist right now. I'm sorry.
Was that for me?
Okay, my part doesn't start till 11 o'clock.
Yeah, but possibly sooner. Possibly sooner. Just
But
depends.
don't tell me that, bro. I'll have us in and out of here.
Hey, Roll.
Yeah.
I think the line is live. Participants are engaged right now,
Okay.
which is a good thing. I get a chance to peek behind the curtain, but I just want to make sure you're all set.
All right, I think I'm in good shape now, Roll. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How is everyone?
Fantastic. How about
Great.
you? How you doing, Alexis?
I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there.
You are the woman of the hour. We want to make sure you're
Thank
good.
you. Thank you. I think everyone is here. I know that Dr. Hewitt will be with us shortly and Dr. T will be with us shortly. We got an opportunity to connect with her this morning, which was awesome.
Fantastic.
It is pretty awesome. I was excited to
Nikisha,
see that. Yay,
you know
T.
that voice.
How are you, Nikisha?
I'm doing well. I'm just getting my water ready.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I'm
Oh
doing
yeah.
Gotta
well.
hydrate.
Let's adjust my
Great. I'm so
background.
happy to have everyone here today.
Yeah, it's nice to see you.
Oh, good to see you too.
It's been a while.
I know this pandemic, right? I haven't
I
seen you all
know.
pandemic, not live anyway.
Yeah, I have a confession. I saw your headshot and I was just sort of baffled by your hair. I'm so amazed by it. It looks great.
Thank you.
I was staring.
It's the
Sometimes
same
when you're
thing.
so used to cell phones, any picture you see, you're trying to magnify it. I was like, oh wait, this is not that. It looks really nice.
Thank
It
you.
does. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. Tell folks I had to get a grown folk haircut.
All right.
Like I don't have time for that.
Just before we start, guys, we are at 145
Wonderful.
attendees. So I know we were expecting good things, but I think I think this topic is really well received. So I'm excited about what we will discuss today.
Fantastic.
Hey, and kudos to you and your team for ensuring that the word got out to the right people.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Thank
100%.
you to Rold. Rold has done a great job.
And I mean, it's a team effort. Team effort.
Great. I think we are gonna start shortly. I'm doing my finishing touches. Be on camera. And then also one other thing, and I know we're live, but we're all family here. But if I feel like I'm gonna take a little bit of a what is the word? Kind of a pass, if you will. If I feel like there's something that we just didn't address, I may jump in, and Glenn, you do the same into the panel if we need to. Just want to make sure that we kind of hit on all the things that we were intended on hitting on.
Um,
Perfect.
another
That sounds good.
another technical question. Do you want us on video, everyone for the whole time, or just for the panelists when the panel time
I
is
think
up?
when the panelists, if you want to stay on, you can, but I think we got to do what's best for us. So do what fits you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Got to have that equity and inclusion. Okay, Dr. Hewitt is on now. Good morning.
Good morning. Are you able to hear me?
We are.
Oh, great. Okay. Glad I made it.
We are. Thank you for joining us. You look beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I was telling everyone we have about 145 attendees. And we're excited. I think this is going to be a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to talk through a really engaging and kind of new and exciting topic in a new way. So I'm excited. Oh no, I'm still not seeing my camera rolled. I'm not seeing my camera. Can't see yourself. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. We'll be starting shortly. We'll give some people some time to get in. I know people may be having some technical difficulties in getting on, but we'll start shortly. We're gonna wait another few minutes, and then we'll start shortly. All right, another minute or so. I'm giving a couple people some more time to get in, and then we'll start about at 10:35. Good morning, everybody. Thomas. Welcome to Serve 202. This is our second session. We're happy to have you all here to be a part of exploring racial equity through volunteerism, recruiting, retaining, and recognizing volunteers of color. So for today's agenda, we will have opening remarks by Chief Service Officer Alexis Squires. She'll give you an overview of Serve DC. We'll have a great panel discussion where we have some great insight, funding features, our unsung heroes, and then closing remarks to let you guys go on your day. So now I would like to kick it over to Chief Service Officer Alexis Squire.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Rold, and thank you to each of you for being here with us today. On behalf of Mayor Bowser and the Mayor's Office on Community Affairs, MOCA, I welcome you to today, our second edition, as Rold mentioned, our second edition of Serve 202, Priorities and Partnerships. My name is Alexis L. Squire, and I have the honor of serving as the Chief Service Officer and the Director of the Mayor's Office on Volunteerism and Partnerships, affectionately known as Serve DC. Thank you to each of you again for availing yourselves and your time and your resources for you to be here today. And you haven't just been with us just today. You've been with us what has been a really powerful and really engaging moment in time, really, to really lead the way with our city through service. And so thank you to each of you for your parts, whether you've served with us in the past, whether you've collaborated as a partner with us, whether you are a grantee with us, or having us to just understand what your needs are around the city. We really appreciate your partnership. And that is really what today is really designed around. It's really to share with each other within community the greatest priorities of the mayor of our city, and doing so in a really collaborative, safe, and productive and progressive space. And so that is why we are here today. Our second edition, I just want to give a shout out to all of you who joined us for our first edition of Serve 202, which was centered around gun violence and COVID recovery. I thought that it was an in-person opportunity. We hosted it with Center for Nonprofit Advancement at our local Busboys and Poets in Anacostia. And we found it to be a really fruitful conversation, a strong and engaging panel with a really dynamic moderator. But really the highlight for us was you and the engagement that we had from our participants and attendees. And so we are excited to have this second edition. Someone asked me recently, how do you choose what you're going to discuss or kind of tackle? Well, we let the data choose it for us, really. We are availing ourselves to our city's greatest priorities. And so what we have been as we've been increasing our engagement in volunteer recruitment, and you all have shown up in unprecedented ways, what we have known is that we want to make sure that the core values, the core work that we do, which is service and volunteerism, that we're able to do it in an accessible, inclusive, and equitable way. So we really have been kind of thinking through this conversation. It's work that we have approached in many ways before through our Volunteer Generation Fund and in partnership with a lot of you who have been on here. But we really want to make sure we know what the issues are within our city. I think we read about them in the newspaper, we experience them. Certainly the mayor is aware of them and is on the, is her vision that we're helping to execute. But we want to know, how can we all be involved? And that means having a look at the things that we do and how we do them and making sure that we all feel involved. And so really that is where we are today, in making sure that we're taking that racial equity lens, that we're being as accessible, as innovative, as collaborative as possible to approach making sure that everyone can show up in community in the way that we know that you want to. And so it's also Black History Month this month. So we're excited to partner again with our MOCA agency, with our sister agency of African American Strategic Affairs, and celebrating how Black people and how Brown people show up in community and how we volunteer, and making sure that we are really bringing all of the partners, all of the stakeholders together, all of our residents together to ensure that you can do it with fidelity, that you're doing it with the same ease that some of our neighbors are able to do it. And so we are so pleased that you are here with us. I think everyone will walk away. Our hope is that you will walk away feeling excited and motivated to better recruit, to retain, and to really recognize volunteers of color, that you will recognize, how to be more innovative, that you will have some new partners. I think that was one of the greatest takeaways from our first session, that you walked away with new friends and new people that you can connect with on this topic and beyond. And we hope that you will also walk away with some resources. We're going to be sharing more about, available funding, some other additional resources that are here within our city. I think, what we want to do in a nutshell is really understand that we are a part of the solutions here in our city, and we can do it through our civic engagement, through our service, and through our partnership and collaboration. So it is a pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to make, kind of cut myself short so that we can get through to Glenn and Center for Nonprofit Advancement, and then a dynamic panel conversation. We want you to be engaged. We want you to be excited. Please use the chat room. If you have questions or need additional accommodations, please let us know. And we are excited. We want this to be as powerful and really a value for you as it is for us. So please stay connected, and we'll get to more of that information in a moment. So I'll share a little bit more about what Serve DC is and who we are and what we do. Our mission is to really connect people to purpose. And we do that through our partnerships, collaboration. We do it through curating service. And we do that through, again, bringing our multi-sector partners together to really engage with one another, ask the tough questions, be at that table, all of us together to create the change that we want to see within our city. We are the service kind of curators of the city. We have a portal. We'll share a little bit more about that later, about how you can stay connected, how you can feel connected with Serve. But that is what we are primarily, we are positioned to do. Again, our mayor gives us a lot of leverage and support to be able to make sure that we are the eyes and ears of the community, and that you are feeling connected and how you can be involved. We do this through civic engagement, through service, again, and through collaboration. Those are the things that we most value. As I mentioned today, our topic is really recruiting, retaining, and recognizing volunteers of color. We're going to be exploring racial equity through the lens of volunteerism and service. Serve DC is many things in terms of our program areas. We are AmeriCorps, and we actually have a formula, our AmeriCorps formula, a grant that is live now, and we're having a session more on that at 2 p.m. So we'll share a little bit more of that later. But today, we really want to make sure that you are centered and able, as a nonprofit practitioner, as a business entity, as a resident, as a volunteer, to really understand how can we better recruit, retain, and engage community members, especially in our most vulnerable communities. We also want to understand the perceived and experienced barriers and explore the best practices of how community members are able to show up and help within our community. And then last but not least, we want to learn the practices and ideas. We want to hear fresh ideas. We'll hear from some experts in the area and know how we can engage in this topic and this challenge more effectively moving forward. Okay, so we have some discussion prompts here. I wanted to start this, as I mentioned, we are really about engagement. We want to make sure that you're feeling connected. So please utilize your chat function. But I think the thing that we all, is a common denominator, I'm hoping with this, if you're joining us today, is that we've all at some point been volunteers. Maybe we haven't been traditional or registered volunteers, but we've done something out of a place of care and concern for our community, for our neighborhoods, for our neighbors. And so it has prompted us to do something that wasn't necessary. It's prompted us to give from a place that may be, again, out of access or excess. And so I wanted us to think through what motivates you to volunteer in your community. What motivates us to show up for our neighbors? What motivates you? And when you have had more time, or when you do have the resources, what motivates you to really serve? And if we could just use our chat function, everyone can just drop in an answer to that now, and we'll come back to it at various points within our discussion. I'll give folks a moment. Why do you serve DC? Okay, I'm seeing someone saying their faith, someone saying that they want to give back to the city that gives so much to them. Amazing. Passion for community and equity. Great. These are all wonderful answers. The next thing that I want us to explore through this conversation, and certainly you can share within the chat, is what barriers prevent you from showing up in community, from volunteering, from serving? If there anything, it could be time, it could be resources or lack thereof. That could be, you have other priorities. What are some barriers that you have experienced that are really preventing you from showing up in community? Awesome. We've got a lot. Yes, I see time. Great. Okay, and the third question, that again, these are just guiding prompts that are going to really direct the rest of our time together. What keeps you connected or engaged to volunteering? And again, we chose to kind of start here because I think at the very least, we're all doing so much and we do different things, but at the very least, we all are part of our community. And so these are questions and experiences that hopefully we've all had the pleasure to have. Thank you so much. I see some really great things in the chat. We will get back to this again during our Q&A. I invite our panelists to have some of this to inform some of the discussions that they will have. But these are really some important things, and we want to walk away knowing some new ideas around why volunteers volunteer, why they show up, some new ideas to consider of what barriers there might be so that we can work around those barriers and find solutions. And then what are some things that we can do collectively as nonprofit practitioners, as community members, as leaders, to really make sure that we are thanking the volunteers, that they feel valued, and that they feel connected and engaged in the work that we so desperately need them to be engaged in. And now I'm going to turn it over to a friend of Serve DC, a trusted partner, and someone who is not, he is very near and dear to this work and has done this work with us for a very long time, Mr. Glenn Ogilvie, who is the CEO of the Center for Nonprofit Advancement. Glenn?
Director Squire, thank you. Thank you for setting the stage for another awesome Serve 202. Really excited to be here, and the center is excited to be in partnership with Serve DC for so many years. As many of you may know, the Center for Nonprofit Advancement has been supporting nonprofit organizations in the District of Columbia since 1979. Those are the types of years that our millennials suggest are, way back when, right? So For 42 years, we've been serving organizations, and we've gotten to know just how important the fabric of volunteers are to the way in which organizations survive and thrive. We all experienced a drop in volunteerism, we realized, during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, which we are still moving through. I'm so excited that ServeDC took the helm and helped to connect people with organizations, helped to redirect PPE where and as necessary, but is continuing to respond to the needs of the community. As such, the center has continued to do much of the same in connecting organizations to the people that they so desperately need to help grow and scale the work that they're doing. So appropriate to have this conversation today and to bring forward tips and strategies and to share in community what works for organizations so that those tips and strategies can be adapted and replicated. And so appropriate the title, Exploring Racial Equity Through Volunteerism, recruiting, retaining, and recognizing volunteers of color, because that is a barrier that we want to address. As much as the pandemic is continuing to move us, so are race equity issues. So we want to stamp that out in every way possible. And today we'll do that with volunteerism and helping us to move forward in a way that is equitable and more appropriate for the work and the people that we are each serving. So without further ado, I too will move us along to get us started. And I'm so excited to share our moderator for today's conversation because this gentleman has the understanding of the District of Columbia for decades, great radio host, TV personality, but more importantly and appropriate for today, has founded his own organization, Creative Solutions for Youth and Academy DC. So Easy Street knows a ton about what's happening and the issues that are impacting the District of Columbia, as well as what it means to start an organization, leverage volunteers, and use that to create long-term sustainability. So without further ado, I will bring forward Easy Street, CEO and founder of Academy DC, to lead our discussion today with our expert panelists. Easy Street.
I guess I need to unmute myself. For starters, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Glenn, for the great introduction. Thank you, Alexis. It's purely a joy to be here on behalf of Creative Solutions for Youth and the Academy DC to serve in this manner. Of course, I have a longstanding relationship with Serve DC and have been a part of your work for a couple of years now, and it's a pleasure to be here and be in the number today as we move forward to talk about volunteerism and how we can better be able to serve our community and also get our community involved. So, with that being said, our guests are amazing. Wow, I mean, the lineup that we have today is incredible, and the list is just these individuals and the work that they've done. Just looking at their bios has been amazing. Good morning, Nikisha Neal Jones. Good morning, Dr. Hewitt. How are you?
Good morning.
All right, everybody turn their mics on. So just for the record, okay, I think that the best discussions that we can have happen like at the dinner table. You know what I mean? They happen at the family reunion where we're all around the table and, we've had something to eat, we've had something to drink, and the kids at the little table over there and it's grown folks talking, right? That is the kind of vibe that I would like to have for us this morning as we discuss exploring racial equity through volunteerism, recruiting, retaining, and recognizing volunteers of color. So are all of our moderators here today? Everyone's here? Okay, all right. I think everyone's here.
Dr. T is about to be logging on. She's coming on from another event. Okay.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And anyone can jump in. This is just a free-for-all question just to get us jumped off to, trying to get the vibe right and talk about what does volunteerism mean to you? And what role do you think that equity plays in volunteerism? Anybody can jump in and answer that.
I can jump in. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Great to be with you all this morning. My name is Amber Hewitt. I'm the director of the Mayor's Office of Racial Equity and the Chief Equity Officer for the District of Columbia government. So really excited about this conversations. When I think about volunteerism, I think it's important to think about it from the traditional Western lens and then how we can apply a racial equity lens to that. So I think from a Western lens, we think about sort of giving freely of time and labor, but without any context. Within my family, volunteerism was very much so linked to civic engagement. So I saw my parents volunteering with the NAACP through their church. My dad organized block parties through the neighborhood, so volunteering in the local neighborhood. But in the context of racial equity, I think it's important, well, I think about how my ancestors were brought to this country and became minorities involuntarily and were forced to give their time and labor. So I think it's important that we apply a racial equity lens to volunteerism. But on the other hand, what are some of the cultural strengths within Black and Brown communities? So, for example, communities of color tend to have what we call a collective self-identity. It's not just about I, it's about we. So when we look within the Black community, there's a long history of taking care of ourselves, taking care of our communities, and giving of our time and labor. So when I think about volunteerism and equity, that's what I think about.
Thank you, Dr. Hewitt. Okay, Ms. Jones, go ahead. Same question. What does volunteerism mean to you, and what role does equity play in volunteerism?
Yeah, I actually agree with a lot of what Dr. Hewitt said. There's this traditional context that we think about, and sometimes that seems inaccessible because it does mean that you are required to give what you don't have. And so you have to have means, or you have to have a lot of time, or you have to be in a position that may not be one that you've normally held. And so putting an equity lens to it really does just look at the everyday things that we do to support one another and to be interconnected and interdependent as a community, and to support that and to celebrate that and to acknowledge that that service that we do for each other every day is valuable. Things like block parties, things like ensuring that neighbors have resources that they may not know about, things like babysitting for someone who actually needs childcare, and really understanding that wherever you are, there's something that you can give. And there's probably something that you can benefit from having help from someone else. And so there are some models like time sharing that actually, really look at that model a lot around like asset-based community development, which also looks at that model of, how do we just look at what we have? And focus on the things that we do have to give, and sharing those things with others in our community, and celebrating that for what it is, and not trying to really look at this broader definition that sometimes like just doesn't fit where we are or who we are.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jones. Now, while we have you on the line, and excuse me, I'm old school with it. Everything is a telephone to me. If I'm on Instagram Live, I'm like, hey, I'm on a call right now. Yeah, Instagram Live. So we on a call right now. Really quick. Hey, Dr. T, good morning. Thank you for joining us. And we're going to get to you next. So, Ms. Jones, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Great. So I'm Nikisha Neal Jones. I'm a native Washingtonian and proud of that, product of DC Public Schools. The work that I do is about equity and justice. I work at Public Allies. We're part of a national network that started right here in DC about 30 years ago. And it's really about helping young people connect to ways to do good in their communities. Our mission is to create a just and equitable society and the diverse leadership to sustain that. And we really do that by activating the leadership of young people. We have 6 core values: diversity and inclusion, collaboration, continuous learning, innovation, focusing on assets, and integrity. Our programs include an AmeriCorps apprenticeship that is really focused on finding young people that are interested in improving their communities, pairing them with local nonprofits or sometimes government agencies, and helping them them to grow as leaders, to grow as people while serving, and helping those organizations also to benefit from the gifts that these young people bring. We support our alumni in their leadership over time. Many of them, including myself, I didn't mention that. I'm an alum of Public Allies. It was the first thing that I did after college, and it was a great way to start my career, knowing that I could do work to connect to my natural interest. And our alumni remain committed to their communities, largely have careers in governments or nonprofit organizations, and continue to lead. So we support them. And then we also do some technical assistance to other organizations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm happy to be here and to be a part of this conversation today.
Well, thanks for coming through. Appreciate that intro. And by the way, I'm following you on Instagram now. Hold on, wait a minute. Hold on. I just did a post on my Instagram, and what I'm gonna need everybody to do is pull out their Instagram and follow everybody. As a matter of fact, put that in your chat. Put that in your chat, what your Instagram handle is. Everyone go ahead and just do that really quickly, okay? And I need to make sure that I'm following Public Allies. And I need y'all to follow me back, okay, Miss Neal? Hold on. All right. Oh, Alexis Squire is not following me. Okay, and also the Office of Racial Equity. And make sure you follow Glenn Ogilvie as well. Everybody follow everyone and make sure you put that in the chat. Because the reality of it is, we're talking about making connections, right? This is the way that we're connecting now more than any other way, especially when we're out here in these COVID streets. So at this time, we have Dr. T in the building. Everybody say, Dr. T's in the building. Good morning. Introduce yourself, and I have a question for you.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. What a great energy. I just got here. It's already a great time. So I'm certainly happy to be here. I'm T. Ocasio-Nuozo. I am the Chief Human Capital Officer at DC Central Kitchen. So, what that means is I oversee what we collectively term people experience. I oversee human resources and recently volunteer engagement and guest experience. And, for those of you who might not be familiar with DC Central Kitchen, we're committed to fighting hunger and poverty through job training and job creation. So we provide culinary job training to individuals who are facing significant barriers to employment. And once they go through that program, we also work on placing them in jobs and meaningful careers within the hospitality / food service industry, including DC Central Kitchen. So out of the 180 employees we currently have, over 60% of our employees are graduates of the culinary job training program. And they don't only hold culinary roles, they also are in non-culinary positions, including program management. So on the job creation side, we also function as a social enterprise. We have a number of food-based social ventures, nutritious meals, healthy snacks to areas across the district where there's the greatest need, whether it's through our cafes, our Healthy Corners program, our meal contracts with partner agencies and other nonprofits, as well as our meal contracts with schools, private schools, public schools, and charter schools, again, across the district, but primarily schools in wards 7 and 8. So again, just happy to be part of this conversation.
Thank you, Dr. T, and it's a pleasure to meet you here. I've been involved with the organization some years back in the 90s. I don't want to date myself, but the work that you guys do in the community has been amazing, and I applaud you. And I just wanted to let you know, each of our guests, that we appreciate all of the things that you've done for our community. So, quick question for you, and if you could just give me a 60-second answer to this, that would be great, so we can go ahead and jump around. What does volunteerism mean to you as an individual?
When I think about volunteerism, I think about two things. I think about service and I think about connection. You just previously mentioned it's all about connecting, right? I've had the perspective of the volunteer, but again, from the perspective of the organization, it really provides a platform for folks to be able to nurture or foster that altruistic tendency, right? So that innate desire that most of us have to want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for connections. Folks volunteer because they want to be connected to other people, other volunteers, other employees of the organization, or they want to be connected to the mission. And I'd say the same would apply to the organization. Organizations like DC Central Kitchen, who see volunteerism as a means to connect with the community.
Thank you so much for that. We appreciate that. Okay, so Dr. Hewitt, I have two questions for you. I'm going to stick to the script on the first question, but you triggered another question. It's something you said in your open, and you're going to be completing your first year as a chief equity officer in district in April. It's the first time the district has had an office, especially addressing racial equity. What does success look like for your agency, and what has it been like leading and shaping this critical agency?
Thank you. And I also will weave into my response, hopefully a partial response to Maurice Cook's comment in the chat around defining what we mean by equity and racial equity. And part of my work, the part of the mission of the office is starting with normalizing what we mean by racial equity. So I'll just start there with our definition. So we define it as a two-part definition, both as a process and an outcome. And I think we're most familiar with the definition of an outcome, where we'll know we'll have achieved racial equity when there are no gaps in health, education, et cetera. So we know that we will have achieved racial equity when race no longer predicts outcomes, resources, the distribution of those resources or opportunities, particularly those who've been most impacted by structural racism, our Black and brown residents. And as a process, that means that we must meaningfully involve and prioritize the voices of those that are most impacted into our government decision-making processes. So as government, as we're designing policies, programs, and budgets, making sure that we're bringing in those voices, because the policies and programs that we're creating will directly impact those lives. So that's how we define racial equity from both a process standpoint and as an outcome. And as you mentioned, this is my first year as the Chief Equity Officer for the district. April 5th will be my 1-year anniversary. Very grateful for Mayor Bowser for appointing me for this critical role. And I will say one of the great things about this role is that I get to build off the mayor's vision for a more racially equitable DC, as well as existing equity and racial equity initiatives that have already existed in government. But as a whole, the office is responsible for creating a framework to guide agencies as we engage communities, as we're designing policies and programs, making sure that they work for everyone, that there are benefits for everyone. So when we talk about a racial equity lens, I know it's this big, sometimes clunky word that's become a buzzword, but we mean evaluating our policies and programs, who are they benefiting, who are they burdening? Can we anticipate or mitigate any unintended consequences? So that's what we mean. So racial equity analysis is just good policy analysis and making sure that everyone has a fair shot in the district. It also means being more intentional in how we design policies and programs. And we want residents to be equal shareholders in DC's growth, and their lived experiences are central to our vision. So our office is here to listen, to understand, and to implement change. So what success would look like is an even more inclusive government and moving the needle on what the community has identified as indicators of change.
Thank you, Dr. Hewitt. A couple things. And for individuals that want to be able to, as the young people would say, tap in and be a part of the discussion, you can put your questions in the chat. Our good friend Ro will be handling those and filling those, and we will get to those questions at probably near the end. But you said something earlier, Dr. Hewitt. You used the word we and us. We and us. It just seems like to me, especially what we're experiencing right now, in the community, there's not enough we and us. It's not. That's why we're having this discussion. So how do we get we and us? How do we get back to we and us instead of me and I? That's my question for you.
That's a great question. I'm reminded of something my dad said, and I don't think he's the originator of this, where you all originator of this phrase. You all may know the originator. He said, "I is the most dangerous word in the English language." So that's the mantra that I grew up with, and I think tapping into that is just tapping into the shared vision of racial equity. So the same systems that are failing people of color are failing all of us. So when we talk about racial equity, we give this metaphor of the fish in the lake. So say you are, walking around the city, you see one fish dead in the lake. You go the second day, you see multiple fish dead in the lake. The first day, you may just think, okay, there's something wrong with the fish. But the second day, you may ask yourself, there's something wrong with the water. So in traditional US, we tend to be fish fixers versus lake fixers, meaning that we're all living in this toxic water that's creating the inequities. And I think it's sometimes, I'm a psychologist by training, so hopefully I'm not tapping too much into my psychology background here.
Let's try to be open. Love it.
But we're all in this system together. I think it's easy to other. It's so easy to do that, particularly in sort of a Western context where we're brought up with this myth of pulling yourselves up by your bootstraps. I do think the COVID-19 pandemic has shed a light on on one that these inequities aren't new. We are exacerbated existing inequities, but everyone will suffer. We must think about sort of how the inequities that some children are experiencing in the education system are going to impact all of us. I think going back to the COVID-19 pandemic, the US is spending billions of dollars on addressing health inequities. We're paying for this. I think it's easy to think short term and think about but we're going to pay for it in the long term. And hopefully this conversation about volunteerism and collaboration will get us closer to that realization.
Hewitt, thank you very much. Your work is very important. If I had $1 for every time that me and Glenn Ogilvy have used the words racial equity in our conversations on the phone, man, I mean, this is something, and I have a question for Ms. Jones next, but Glenn, what do you think about what she just said? Because I'm not sure that people really understand the importance of this word. And I'm glad that we're now living in a time where we're talking about these issues and we're talking about these numbers. We're talking about the data and why is it way up here and this is way down here? Why do we have so many people able to do this, but then so many of our people are not being able to experience equity in this country? And I want to give you an opportunity to chime in on what she just said.
I want to thank Dr. Hewitt for her points and the rest of our panelists. This is getting right to the heart of our purpose today. But I do want to underscore as well that race equity work is difficult and it's uncomfortable. And in the words of someone that I met with more recently, if your temperature isn't rising, your blood pressure a little bit, if your voice isn't shaking, you're not necessarily getting to the heart of the work and working to make change and to adjust the issues that are impacting us the most, in the greatest possible way. So I do believe that bringing people together, there's a level of education that needs to happen first, which then would become and create a level of comfort that can allow us all to come together on the issues and move forward with some of the strategies that we know work and have worked in other communities.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate it. Okay, Mrs. Jones. We got a thing going on, and you are next, okay? As the executive director of Public Allies, a leading nonprofit in the district, we have seen many nonprofits struggle to engage volunteers who reflect the racial and ethnic diversity of the communities that they serve. How are you ensuring from a leadership role that Public Allies is engaging these communities as volunteers?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. For us, it's a core part of our mission. And so the first thing that helps us to do it is a reminder of why we exist. We're really about ensuring people that haven't had a seat at the table get in positions of influence, and that they know they have more options when they leave us than when they came to us. And so as we think about our allies, as we call them, these are the young people who are serving in other nonprofits and then going to serve broadly in their communities. Like that's really what we're trying to do. And so there's intentionality after that. In the in the scheme of AmeriCorps, Public Allies has really been an anomaly for a long time because we were really committed to and we remain committed to recruiting young people that reflect the communities that are being served. And we're so grateful to see so many other AmeriCorps organizations get intentional about that. And it's work. You know, people that find us through regular channels like the internet and sometimes through other places where people find out about AmeriCorps. That's not the population for the most part that we want. Like we want people that know communities. We want people that sometimes don't have college degrees, but they got a lot of lived experience that they can bring into the roles that they have. And so it's ensuring that we have relationships with our alumni, that we're connecting with our community partners, that we are doing the work to ensure that the word gets out about the opportunity so that we can be reflective. And then looking at all levels of the organization. So those are the AmeriCorps members that we have. There's also intentionality about our staffing and ensuring that that's also reflective of the community. There's intentionality about our board and advisory board, which sometimes when you think about this conversation about equity and resources, sometimes it can be everywhere in a nonprofit except the board, because traditionally, you know, those boards of like people who have access to power have not been reflective of the communities that have been served. Yet for us, it's just important to be intentional at all levels and ensure that we're consistently forming relationships so that we're connected of, we're reminded of, and that we're engaged with community as we do this work.
Thank you, Mrs. Jones. All right, Dr. T, I want to have you piggyback off that. One of the things that she said was very dynamic, and I thank Mrs. Jones for pointing out the importance of us being able to help us. You know what I mean? What types of things are you doing over there to ensure that we're making sure that we have us helping us, that we're seeing our faces? I mean, we already know, if you look at the numbers statistically for individuals who are homeless in the city, is disproportionately high for African Americans. We know that those numbers exist. I know that those numbers exist because of the work that I've done with the Friendship Place. In the past years, I'm the official DJ for them, and I see, and then also you see it in our city too. You don't have to, if you're riding through, particular parts of Noma or other areas, you see it. So my question to you is, how are you ensuring that us is helping us and making sure that our faces are being represented in that way?
Absolutely. So, the way folks come to know and understand DC Central Kitchen, and which has been the case for several years, has been through our in-person volunteer opportunities in the kitchen. They come in and, they learn about the work we do. They get to work alongside our culinary job training students. They get to work alongside our employees. But as Ms. Jones mentioned, the way folks, come to know about those opportunities are through the internet or through, corporate relationships, right? But one of the things that we have been actively working to, especially at this very interesting inflection point that we're experiencing, is how do we get our volunteer programming back to where it's a medium that we can connect with. We can get it back to a vehicle for community engagement. And one just practical strategy has been making it human-centered, right? Connecting with organizations who work with community-based organizations who work closely with volunteers of color, understanding their needs, being able to think creatively and innovatively out of the box, being able to curate volunteer opportunities that would align with their interests as well as with our mission, right? So it's basically thinking more broadly, understanding that volunteerism for a lot of individuals, for a lot of community members, is also about skill development. It's also a very tangible pathway to getting jobs, to securing jobs that may not necessarily be, again, within the culinary field. And so one of the reasons, as part of our just strategic planning endeavor, one of the reasons that volunteerism is now under my portfolio, human resources portfolio, is because there's a real opportunity to leverage our diversity, equity, and inclusion lens that we have. I would say we've strengthened in the last few years in terms of driving our employee endeavors, and we're now looking for ways to leverage some of those systems, some of those approaches, and in a way that it's targeted towards volunteerism, again, with a focus on community engagement. So prior to the pandemic, we had 10,000 volunteers a year, right, from everywhere around the world. But again, we want to get ourselves back to where we're focusing on the community. And, as Ms. Jones said, it's about being intentional. These things don't happen organically. The fact that we service the communities we serve, the fact that, we're based in DC, the fact that our programs are geared towards members or residents of Ward 7 and 8 wouldn't necessarily translate to folks having access to these volunteering opportunities. So it's about us being intentional and connecting with organizations who already work with these populations and thinking creatively and innovatively of ways that we could establish, volunteering programming that, again, get to the needs of members of these other partner organizations that we've been working with. So a lot of our focus, I'd say, in the last year or so has been in that approach. Again, just very tangible and practical in terms of what it is we're trying to get out of our volunteer engagement efforts.
Thank you, Dr. T. So this next question is for Dr. Hewitt. What is that picture in the background? I'm sorry. That picture in the background is over your right shoulder. What is that?
I must say I inherited the office decor. It is, I would have to look up what it is, but I believe it's a part of the Commission on Arts and Humanities, their portfolio of art. But I can't tell you exactly.
Nice. Loving that. Loving the decor back there. I just wanted to let you know that I'm a fan of art, so I had to ask you that. And
Can I bump in for a second though?
Go ahead.
Because even I think that even is a part of what we're talking about today is representation. And Dr. Hewitt, as you mentioned, it is a part of our Commission of Arts and Humanity. And I don't know if you all can see the art behind me too, but it's a part of, and I'm hearing it in a lot of what our panelists are saying, representation, right? And so when folks come to our office, there is art that reflects us. And so that is how we center. It's a part of how we center ourselves. And it is a part of how we show up in community and celebrate community. It's by having that representation. So we are so pleased and honored to have a curation of art that is a part of our offices to really help to really manifest what is important to us. And I think to one of your questions, and I know I said I was going to try to limit it, but I just have this is such engaging conversation and it's powerful, but I think it's how we show up. What are we showing when we're recruiting volunteers of color? What are the images that our organizations are putting out with our newsletters, with our publications, with our social media? Are we showing Black board members and highlighting Black board members? Are we showing Black volunteers in service and mentoring? Are we highlighting those narratives and stories, the pictures and the images that will really help to motivate others within community to show up in the same way? I think sometimes we've seen our experiences, or we've seen, especially in some of our most vulnerable communities, we've seen westernized kind of approaches to recruitment, to branding, and to outreach. And so I think we have to challenge ourselves to really think through what images are we putting out there if we really say our goal is to get more people of color to be within our communities and within our organizations. So I'll stop there, but I just think that representation is always a really great starting place.
Thank you so much for that comment. I did not know by me merely asking about that picture back there would trigger that, but you are—
That's the dinner table. You said we at the dinner table.
Exactly. And shout out to Mayor Muriel Bowser. No disrespect to the past mayors. My heart is Mayor for Life, Marion Barry, and the rest of them leading up to Muriel Bowser. But when it comes to the arts, I just want to park here for 30 seconds. Nobody has done it better. The murals in our city, the representation, her naming Go-Go as the official music of Washington, D.C., This is all art, folks. And this is very important. That's one of the things me and Glenn talk about. That's the program that we have for Safe Passage through the Deputy Mayor's Office of Education. You know, one of the things is we are teaching social media production to the youth so they can be able to see themselves. They need to see themselves and hear themselves in podcasts doing positive things, and you know, using the arts are very important. So I'm so glad that you piggybacked on that, because that's very important, and we can't sleep on that. Very important, very important. Art is a healer. Okay, art is a medicine. We know that for a fact. Okay, so now that we have Dr. Hewitt, you're not done yet. You're not done. Don't go anywhere. Come on back. Put down the potato salad for a second since we at the dinner table. Your next question is this, and I've been wanting to ask you this for a second now. What are some of the tools and best practices your organization has created when it comes to engaging volunteers of color?
Thank you for the question. So as a new office, we are still building capacity in that area. At the same time, we've done a lot of research and a landscape analysis across other jurisdictions and how they're engaging communities. So I think some of the principles that we've learned around meaningful community engagement that we're sharing with district government agencies can also be applied to volunteerism as well. So for example, ongoing and intentional relationship cultivation. And I think Alexis talked about some of the, the importance of inclusion broadly. So what are some of the facets of sort of US dominant culture that may be barriers? So one of those is our sense of urgency. So we tend to be very obsessed with time. That's a very sort of a Western concept. So how does that show up in volunteerism? So for example, that could look like, volunteers who don't work out are seen as a waste of time versus the importance of building new relationships and growing trust. Another aspect of a sort of US dominant culture is quantity over quality. So in the importance of sort of, or the opposite of forcing quick recruitment versus building those authentic relationships. And then also this concept called paternalism, which just simply means sort of those with power sort of holding control and making all of the decisions in the interest of those with power. And sometimes I think that dichotomy between who is being served and who is served, that just seeing it as that dichotomy can be a barrier. So for example, how can we prioritize the feelings and reactions of the community that we're serving versus those who are, maybe putting all of the dollars putting all the dollars into the system that's making the organization run. So just quickly, a couple other principles that we've learned that we're sharing across government around understanding racial and historical trauma. So these are all principles that I think could inform best practices. So how we're engaging communities, what are some of the historical context that may be in the mind, in the spirit of the community that's impeding that trust. So community engagement engaging community volunteerism, that can only happen at the speed of trust. A couple other principles around accessibility. So making sure, I think Dr. T mentioned some of this as well. So not just sort of the time that service is being offered, is it accessible through language accessibility, and just making sure that we're entering communities through through cultural humility. So those are some of the principles that I think could inform best practices.
Thank you. Excuse me. What? 2 words. I thought I was at the go-go. I was like, bring it. Come on. I was at the go-go for a minute. You mentioned 2 words, trust and trauma. Ooh, I don't know if y'all want to go there with it, but these are issues that we're facing. These are 2 key words. We're going to come back to those words. Alexis, did you want to jump in really quick?
No, I mean, you're right. Those 2 words are real, and they really affect. I was reading the chat here of Reagan. They affect how we show up, or if we show up, and I think the trust piece she just mentioned, Reagan mentioned about, you think you're doing something on the individual level, but if you don't see the impact on a structural level, that sometimes you get discouraged as a volunteer. And I think that's something that we all have witnessed or experienced. And I think that that's why convenings like today are really important being in connection, not just with our neighbors, which is essentially important, but with the government, right? With our nonprofits, and then making sure that what we are doing, even if it's on a block to block level, that there is some collaboration and some strategy so that we are seeing the change that we want to see. But I understand that it gets discouraging when you're not seeing that, and you're just doing your one part. But I think when we get in community with each other at a larger capacity or level, that is when we can really understand, even if there are challenges, what challenges are you having versus, in Southeast, what challenges are happening in communities around volunteerism versus Northwest. Let's talk about it so that we can really create solutions to that. So I really appreciate everyone's got a really engaging, insightful feedback. So I'm gonna stop right there for now.
You said that last time.
I know.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone.
Can I just add something briefly to that? Just that many of us in nonprofits are coming to the same realization that if we only serve, that these larger issues will always be the same. And so I would encourage you, if there are organizations that you're connected to, because a number of them are also looking at the long-term changes and how do we organize and how do we use our influence to ensure that the reasons why we're doing some of this work, they really don't exist, or at least we're getting at it in a way that it's more equitable. And so many of us are coming to the same realization. I just wanted to share that it's not your frustration. I think it's also a lot of the sector's frustration, and many organizations have decided that they need to do both in response to that.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. This is Serve DC's Exploring Racial Equity Through Volunteerism, Recruiting, Retaining, Recognizing Volunteers of Color discussion. There's around some very key issues like accessibility, diversity, equity, livability, opportunity, prosperity, resilience, and safety. I'm Maisie Street. That is Glenn Ogilvie from the Center for Nonprofit Advancement. We sponsor this event, and our good friend Alexis Esquire, the director of Serve DC, and our esteemed guest. We really appreciate everyone for tuning in. We have a lot of people in the chat. We want to let you know we'll be getting to your questions. If you have questions for the Q&A part, get them ready, rolled. We'll get them all set up, and we will ask those before we close. We'll answer some of those questions before we close out. Also want to remind you to follow all of us. Make sure you follow Serve DC on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and everybody else that's inside the chat. And if you're new coming into the chat right now, or new coming into this event, please post your Instagram and your Facebook so everybody can follow one another, because we know that connectivity is one of the solutions to our problem. Okay, so I want to ask Dr. T, let's get back to you over there at the Central Kitchen, since I'm in my kitchen right now. What systems do you have in place to recruit volunteers? That's question number one.
Yeah, so to be frank with you, with 10,000 volunteers a year, we prior to the pandemic, we necessarily have formal or structured recruitment systems per se. I think our focus at the time was accessibility, making sure that whoever wanted to volunteer, they were able to. We focused a lot on sign-up technology. But I talked about the fact that we find ourselves at a very interesting inflection point. We've suspended our in-person volunteer operations, and it's also given us, time to just really think about what it is we want to get out of our volunteer programming. And, one of the blind spots that we recognized going through our volunteer needs assessment is that, as you know, with technology, it's a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, you have the benefits and the efficiency that technology resources provides, but on the other hand, it does create a barrier in terms of who has access, to these opportunities. And so one of the ways that we're looking to I guess balance or supplement our technology resource is to supplement that with people resources. Again, making it a very human-centered experience in terms of how we are engaging with volunteers, looking at the full volunteer, so not just recruitment. You mentioned recruitment, but really engaging or dedicating people resources, dedicating staff to these recruitment efforts, because it really boils down to that connection. It really boils down to people. And as a workforce development organization, whenever there's an opportunity for us to interface with our communities, what we want to do is provide a platform to basically elevate voices of our colleagues who are from these communities. And so for us, we have a very real opportunity to get folks who are residents of these communities, folks who understand the needs of the communities, to be at the forefront in these recruitment efforts. And so we've created a team that we call our People Experience team, who will be at the forefront of making these connections, establishing these relationships and these partnerships. We've also created a department, a community development and partnerships department that's solely dedicated to identifying, again, organizations and opportunities to partner with community-based organizations. So that's really been the evolution of our recruitment process, where, again, our focus has been on efficiency, volume, making sure folks who are interested in connecting with DC Central Kitchen are able to do so. But now we're at a point where we want to balance that with, just, again, making sure there's that human touch and that real connection with the community in terms of our recruitment approach.
Thank you, Dr. T. So, Ms. Jones, wanted to ask you this. What is the primary demographic makeup of your volunteers over at Public Allies?
Yeah, so our allies, as we call them, are young adults, all people of color, and average age tends to be about 23 or 24. About half have college degrees and half do not, and overwhelmingly local, like over 90%.
Okay, and so also in like 60 seconds for Dr. T, same question. What is the primary demographic makeup of your volunteers?
So they run the gamut. I wouldn't be able to necessarily answer that question because it's not data that we've been consistently good at segmenting. But they range from corporate volunteers to individual volunteers. I think on the professional volunteer, like the skills-based volunteer pool, we're very intentional. I think that's where we have the opportunity to be really intentional in terms of the types of partnerships and the types of volunteer opportunities that we're providing to specific groups and to specific individuals. We've actually had the opportunity to work with Ms. Jones of Public Allies as an example of a success story, right? So a really successful partnership that we engaged in last year, recognizing that we weren't, although we had suspended our in-person volunteering efforts, I think it really gave us a chance to focus on other aspects of volunteerism. And that successful partnership allowed us again, to connect with individuals, members of the community who have these great, unique skill sets where they might not have otherwise had the opportunity to leverage or develop. So we got to have this mutually beneficial relationship with the specific ally, obviously partnership with the organization, and that all that resulted in employment. So we ended up hiring the ally who's now with us. She's an incredible asset to the organization, specifically to the human resources team. So there is that success story, perhaps not the data you were looking for, but again, that's one area that we recognize as a gap, and it's something that we're currently actively working on in terms of developing software that will do this very specific, that would allow us to advance our work as far as being intentional about applying this equity lens to our volunteer efforts.
She used the key word, Glenn, collaboration. Use the C word, one of my favorite words. And this is something that I learned from Glenn over at the Center for Nonprofit, the importance of this word. And I think that in the scope of what we're talking about, it's extremely necessary for us to collaborate. Glenn, I want to give you a second to chime in on that, since you're an expert at it. Me and you are collaborating, and you collaborating with all these nonprofits. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate that. So collaboration first, and then I do have a thought around volunteerism as well. You said it easy. Without collaboration, we can't exist in this space. there's too much challenging us for one organization to do it alone. But I think the key to collaboration is clearly defining the roles of each entity coming together, right? And evaluating how well it's going and making adjustments when and where and as necessary. So we learned it during the Great Recession. Further, realized it now during the COVID-19 pandemic. When organizations come together, they can realize so much more than if they are as moving forward as individuals. But with regard to volunteerism, and Dr. T, you've been great on this as well as you, Ms. Jones. How are we cultivating volunteers? And I say that because we don't just want anybody to show up and say, I'm going to help your organization without knowing their skills and capabilities. But we don't want skills and capabilities to be a barrier to equitable engagement. So I know, Dr. T, your team has done training before volunteers even touch the floor. And Ms. Jones, you've done that as well. But can you share a little bit about how you cultivate and create volunteers who can be established and support your organizations over the long term?
Sure. That is really helpful. Um, and I think it's also from learning, especially when engaging with corporate volunteers, because a lot of times with corporate volunteers, they say that they really want to be engaged in the organization. We've had to ask the question, are they ready? To engage with the population we serve, and what would they need to be ready, and what are the characteristics of someone who really gets that. Like what we see, that our young people have gifts. They don't always come in a traditional package, but that what they bring is valuable, and that there's this larger contextual lens, like just based on the experiences that they've had. And so there has to be some understanding of like what it's like. What are some of the challenges and some of the good things about growing up in this area, and how that impacts the people that we serve. And so we've definitely found that, especially on the corporate side, like we really have to be explicit about that, and we have to get to know them before they engage with the population itself. Now, as the allies who are volunteers, again, they're coming with their own lens, and we're also encouraging them to look more deeply into the community, especially around the stories. And that you have a story and everyone has a story. And sometimes it's so important to understand that. You might not get that in the irate conversation that you have. You don't know what that person had to go through, but to give grace in that engagement with the broader community because of that. So I think that those two things have been really important, whether it's board, whether it's corporate volunteers, or other volunteers, like just understanding that there's a broader context, and also like that when you come and engage, like you're not going to see deficits, you're going to see value, and you're going to help to support people where they want to grow and learn.
Awesome points. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to chime in on that question? And by the way, keeping an eye on the time, we're going to start the Q&A in 3 minutes. Did anyone else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I did want to piggyback, because I think that's an excellent segue, right? So again, the value of collaboration and partnering with like organizations like Public Allies is, one, we understand what it is that they are looking to do. And so when we work with them, and we work with engaged allies or engage participants from the program, and engage them in volunteerism, we build on that, right, by creating or providing specific skill development tools, right? So we very much see our volunteer resources as a critical human resource. And so by the time they enter our organization, we're looking to empower them, really. And one of the ways we do that is by using a very tangible tool, the Gallup Strengths Finders Assessment. It's basically a way that we're able to empower our volunteers as well as our staff with language, with understanding, with insights as far as what it is that they're able to bring to the table. So it's one thing to know that you are of value and you do bring something to the table. It's another thing to be able to articulate and understand and convey and communicate exactly what that is. So again, with the ally we had the chance to work with, when she took her Strengths Finders assessment, we were like, you're an achiever, you're a relator. And she was able to take that language. So whether or not she ended up working with us as an employee, wherever it is she would have ended up working, or wherever it is her career would have taken her, she was at least empowered to enough to understand that, you know, she had these unique skill sets that she could speak to and point to and bring to any organization. So I think that yet another illustration of how important in these critical, you know, how important and critical these types of collaborations and this types of synergy are, just in terms of empowering our volunteers and using volunteerism as a real platform for skill development and career pathways.
Thank you, Dr. T.
Could I jump in for just 60 seconds to tie something that Ms. Jones and Dr. T said? I'm first a huge fan of the Strengths Finder. I think it's a great tool. Our team, my team has completed that. We're going to have a session on that later, but I think it's also important to use that to help folks tap into their own sense of power, to realize their own sense of power and agency to change community. I know that's what Ms. Jones Foundation or Jones organization is all about. And she touched on the importance of educating volunteers, but also educating them on race equity topics. The onus shouldn't always be on the community to do the education. So in addition to building those relationships, educating volunteers on race equity and the historical racial trauma, but also reviewing policies within organizations through an equity lens as well.
Before we jump into the Q&A, I want to I have a bonus question for Dr. Hewitt that I want to ask. How has the Office of Racial Equity engaged the nonprofit community in the district to ensure equitable practices that are happening?
That's a great question. And I always say that, you know, government work on racial equity is necessary, but not sufficient. We have to partner externally, not in addition to residents with lived experiences, but the nonprofit, the business sector as well. So we, in the next few weeks, are hoping to stand up our Racial Equity Advisory Board, which will consist of 9 community members across district government who will be representative of the nonprofit sector and the business sector. So we hope to leverage that body to do that work. Also, in March, we'll be hosting a summit called the Anti-Racist City Summit, where we'll be convening 7 sectors. So not just government, so philanthropy, nonprofit, I'm going to forget some of the sectors, union, and other sectors to work. How can we all how can all of these sectors coalesce around racial equity best practices? Because it can't just live in one sector.
Thank you, Dr. Hewitt. And I'm just extremely happy to hear you say that, and blessed. I just want people that are viewing, you know, this event today to understand, like, the conversation that we're having today, these conversations are not happening in a lot of cities in this country. I'm not trying to point fingers, but they're not talking about these issues and dealing with it the way Washington, D.C. is. And I'm just blessed to be here. And I'm thankful at the same time that we have a city, a district, you know, and a mayor that's willing to have, you know, and put, you know, dollars and energy behind these important conversations. You know, the conversations have to happen. You know, the work has to happen. And I just wanted to big up everyone that's viewing and involved with the conversation. Now, Mr. Rose, how are you, sir? You're going to handle the Q&A questions, right? Because I do not want that responsibility at all.
Yeah, I got you.
Pass it to Rose.
All right. So one of the questions that I pulled, trust and engagement. What does this look like? How can trust be gained when engaging in our community? What are some steps? So we could do a popcorn style. Whoever wants to address this first can go ahead, have at it.
Remember, we're at the dinner table, y'all. Jump in.
I can say something. I think it's just about showing up consistently. And that is the, like, really seeing every interaction as an opportunity to build trust, because really, whether or not we see it, it is. So every time we engage, really being intentional about building trust, like doing your homework, understanding what is happening in a community, like what are some challenges and barriers in the relationships that we might have as organizations, sometimes as individual. And then sometimes, you know, like we don't know what's happened in the past. Well, we do know actually that a lot of promises have been broken and a lot of commitments have not been kept. And so in our engagement, like really just being intentional and consistent about showing up and using that as an opportunity over time to build trust.
I would add one thing to that role too. I think being recognized, and I think Nikisha, you spoke to that, especially from a volunteer perspective. They want to be seen. We're all in community. They're showing up in this capacity, and they want to know that it matters and that it is appreciated. And so I think we build trust every time we recognize volunteers as well. And that's something that we didn't really get in a formal, but I hope that we address through our Q&A of how do we appropriately recognize volunteers, especially those who are coming from, maybe they don't have as much time, but they're still volunteering and showing up. How do we say we see you, we recognize you, we appreciate you? I think that is another key element of how we build trust, especially with our brown and our Black and brown volunteers.
That's why later on today we are going to highlight some of our unsung volunteer heroes right here on the screen. So nobody leaves. Stay for that part. You could leave after the benediction. Go ahead, Roll.
All right. It's just so we could get through all the questions. Another question we had was, what can we do as organizations to help volunteers to address trust and trauma? And it kind of taps into the last question.
I'll jump in because I had a comment to the last question. I think it touches on the second question. And I said this previously, that authentic community engagement can only happen at the speed of trust. So I think we have to come into this work with that realization. And I believe Ms. Jones touched on, we've broken, promises have been broken. So understanding that community engagement must be deep and long lasting. So as we're engaging volunteers, making sure that we're following through, that we aren't just coming in, once, that we, as Director Squire said, that we're recognizing our volunteers and our civic leaders. And also, balancing, that sense of urgency that I mentioned before, that's more of the Western model. So balancing that with, creating trusting relationships over time.
Roll, let me drop accountability in there as well on both sides. Holding volunteers accountable, but being accountable ourselves. I think that's a huge trust builder, from the application to the agreement to making sure that they've done and we've done what we said we would do.
All right, let me get to the next question. How exactly can we bridge the gap from volunteer to workforce development / career placement? Establishing certifications, what are some strategies and incentives?
Great question. Whoever asked that, shout out to whoever asked that question. Go ahead, you guys, jump in.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. That's how I got my job at DC Central Kitchen as the Chief Human Capital Officer at DC Central Kitchen, if I'm being frank. Prior to working here, I had an HR consultancy that focused a lot on international development. And so I had no idea how to get my foot in the door. I knew I wanted to work for a mission-driven organization. And so I started volunteering. And I happened to get a volunteer opportunity with a food access organization for which the CEO of DC Central Kitchen was on the board. And so as a last minute decision, I added this volunteer work on my cover letter. And when I came in for my interview, he said to me, the only reason you're here is because of this organization. So it's something I'm very passionate about. It's something that I continue to be intentional about in terms of our professional volunteer engagement efforts. And so one of the things we do is we align our volunteer, I call it a life cycle. So whether you're talking about recruiting, retention, recognizing volunteers, it's very much aligned with the strategies that we implement for employees. And so through this process, we are intentional about cultivating specific skills, whether it's interviewing skill sets, not necessarily using them as barriers, but recognizing that it's a real platform for folks to get the exposure. Oftentimes folks seek this volunteer opportunities as a way to get their foot in the door. We recognize that we understand that we have a responsibility as a workforce development organization to support that. So it comes with a lot of training. It comes with a lot of personal and professional development, and just having them integrate into the workforce and feel valued feel that they're making contributions to the work that we do and to the mission that we do, and where and when possible, supporting their career placement efforts. As far as we're concerned, we see them as a resource, and so where when possible, it's always to our benefit when we're able to retain them as employees. So it's something that we are, again, very intentional about, because we see it as a real way to cultivate a pipeline, a talent pipeline between the communities that we're in and, of course, the organization.
Great answer. We have another great question. How do we deepen our engagement with youth volunteers?
So I saw that question as from one of our alums who is now at Martha's table. I really think that a lot of what I would say is what she already knows. Yet and even what we would think about any volunteer, if someone is giving of their time, they also we also want to get to know who they are as people, what they care about, what are interests that they have, what are ways that we can help them, in addition to the ways that they're serving us. And I think that's especially important for young people, having safe spaces where they have like caring adults that they can talk to, or if they're young adults, like having spaces where they have people who can just support them, like whether it's professionally or just be a sounding board for where they're going in life, like really understanding that these are whole people, and young people, like what are some of the things that they love doing, like what are incentives that are important for them to engage with, talking to them, really about like what would make it more fun, more engaging, more consistent, like for them and people who are, like in their same age group, as well as ensuring that their voices, like maybe even in a formal way, ensuring that they have voice in some of the ways that volunteers engage. And I would say that those are some things that would really be helpful for young people. Yet at the end of the day, like all volunteers would probably want those things to happen.
Can I jump in really quick? And thank you so much for those comments, Ms. Jones. When we're talking about engaging the youth, that's what we do over at Academy DC, and meeting the youth where they are is super duper important. Super duper important. As we were having this discussion, I was just thinking about, the civil rights movement and who started that, and the bulk of those individuals who were on the front line for us to be able to get voting rights and, many other things that happened back in the 60s. It was the youth, right? And I don't think that has changed at all. I think that, we have seen something happen very dynamic and special here in Washington, D.C. with the Don't Mute D.C. movement. You saw those thousands of individuals at the Reeve Center. You saw that, and you see how these young people in Washington, D.C. continue to move that needle forward for the music, for the culture, and also for political reasons as well. I think that we need to be looking at how do we tap into that. We need to be looking at how are they mobilizing. They're doing, and they're back to what a director just said a little bit ago. They're using what? Music, art. They're using art to be able to attract the masses, to be able to, to sign up to vote, to understand what's going on in the community. I think that we need to be looking at how in our individual organizations, how do we use art and popular culture to be able to bring the young people in? We have the creativity, people. We are Kaumba. We are that. Out of all the things that we are creativity. So I think that if we just use that Kaumba that we have that resides in us and be able to develop plans and strategies to bring in the youth, there's nothing that we can't do.
And I'd like to add one more to that, Rold, and thank you, Easy, for raising that. I think we also have, through partnerships and collaboration, we can address barriers. We can reduce barriers. If travel and transportation is a barrier for our young people or for our volunteers of color, we can partner with organizations. Certainly, I would challenge everyone to use Serve DC as that resource to think about what partnerships we can create to find solutions to some of those barriers. Childcare. I know I see Lauren Cranman over here. Some of the things that we are designing and having resources for those being served, I think we have to think of volunteers in that same approach. And so it's really great to hear from DC Central Kitchen to have volunteerism as an HR component, because I think the same way that we need to offer resources and capacity building for our employees and for our clients, we need to think of our volunteers in the same way. And I mentioned Lauren Cranman from Community of Hope. I think, you know, they're always making sure that childcare is a possibility for their residents and for those who are going to be involved in community and in service. So I think we have to think through some of the challenges, be creative, engage others, and collaboration to really reduce those barriers.
All right, we have a couple more questions and then we'll move on to the next segment. But our next question is, how can my mostly white religious nonprofit in Northwest DC reach out to all DC's citizens for volunteers? And also, how do you reach out to the international community?
Dinner table, dinner table. Don't make me jump in because you know I will. I swim very well. Go ahead, Glenn.
Great question. I was waiting for someone else to jump in on this, but I think when we want to engage the full community, we have to share the opportunity across all mediums, right? So we want to make sure that we are sharing it on all social media to all people and also meeting people where they are. So a little bit of research to understand where the community may lie that you are intentionally trying to engage, and then showing up, as some of us said earlier, and making sure we're able to promote it in that way.
I'm not sure who asked that question, but that is a very important question. Mm-hmm. It really, really is. And whoever asked that question, I'm not looking at the chat right now, but reach out to me. Reach out to me, please.
Let me add to that too. We want to make sure that that organization, I think it was described as all white, is ready to receive people, the full organization, right? So there's some organizational prep that also needs to happen. So doing those two things, I think, can really expand and broaden the engagement and get to that goal that we're looking for.
Right, and being real with it too, you know, being 100% real with it, just like we are, is super duper important. And I think that, you know, we need allies. We need, I mean, we're doing the work as individual groups, you know, we're doing the work as a people, but we do need to reach across. I hate to use the word reach across the aisle, but, you know, just looking back at history, you know, we've seen it happen. And I think that moving forward, that's equally important. So whoever that is, reach out to me and I'd love to meet you.
And can I add one thing to that? I think also knowing who the trusted community messengers are who can serve as a broker between your organization and the community. So being intentional and strategic about who you're engaging to reach your targeted community.
I would also add asking the why. Is this important for you? And because the question of volunteers is coming up, there might be other implications for the organization itself as you think about makeup and who you bring into the different roles of the organization. And keep asking why until you really get to a point where you can't ask why anymore.
Ms. Jones, this brings me to your point just now, and a point earlier brings me to a thinking around an area of the organization we haven't touched on heavily, where there are in fact volunteers, and that's the board. Board members are volunteers, and they wield and hold so much power in the direction and the guide of the organization. So I'd love to spend some time, if we can, talking about how we ensure that the board is diverse, if we have points on that, and how we work to recruit that diversity and make sure that that race equity lens is floating down throughout all aspects of the organization, as we know it should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely say that intentionality, as in every other area, is important. And then understanding of, you know, the racial equity lens is why our boards mostly made up of people who are not representative of communities. I mean, why is nonprofit leadership mostly made up of people that are not representative of communities? And in having that conversation, understanding, also assessing like where the current board is along the continuum, what they would need to be able to ensure that it is reflective of the community, like why that's important. I do think that we are in a moment in time where there are so many organizations that are looking at this. There are so many resources out there in terms of racial equity, in terms of just understanding that just inclusion, in terms of, like really understanding like how this makes the work on the ground even better because the leadership of the organization has those voices included. And so I think it's first understanding like where that organization is. And I know there are a lot of folks on this call who are probably more like a lot more well versed than I am. Dr. Hewitt, I see George Jones is in the room as well. So a lot of folks that can speak to, resources that exist around racial equity and training. Yet it's going to first start with who do you have? How our community voices are being heard or not being heard within the organization, and then how do you use that? Like sometimes it might be training, and having the understanding of who you need that's not represented currently on the board. And it's hard work, having these conversations, as you mentioned, that are uncomfortable, knowing that there are people that may not have a different sense of how racism has played out. Like, again, we've had some help over the past couple of years, really about where we are in terms of race and racism and systems in our country. Yet there are still people that, it's not a daily experience for them. And so it's going to take some work to help move them along. Yet at the end of the day, if we're ultimately committed to improving the lives of people that are struggling in our communities, we've got to work and do the consistent work to make those connections. And I wish you could wave a magic wand and do it. But I think that those are some of the steps that it'll take to get there.
Great points. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
All right. In closing, this is the last question. This will go out to everybody. So one of the questions is, how do I become a partner? How can, the folks that are attending, listening to this, how can they partner with your organizations? And then part of that was, we'll cover how to get funding. And is there something else? Like, how do we get stipends for our volunteers?
I'll jump in quickly. I just dropped the link to our website in the chat, ori.dc.gov. You can sign up for our newsletter to hear updates. You can also go on the website and request a meeting with me and the team. We also will be engaging the public through forums over the next couple of months as we devise the city's action plan around racial equity. So those are a few ways to stay connected to the Mayor's Office of Racial Equity.
And I will jump in. I think again, it's forums like this. It's continuing to connect with these expert panelists, with those who are doing the work, with organizations that are doing similar work as you are. To really see what their best practices are. I think we have so many great examples of our city of folks who are getting it right or who are striving to get it right. I think that some of those resources should be available, and certainly we are here at Serve to help you to be able to navigate and find some of those best practices. And then one other thing in terms of stipends, I think that is a very novel, but really promising idea around recruiting volunteers, especially those who are looking to volunteer, but also have other priorities that are centered in their lives. So I think the idea around stipends is very interesting and one that we should really explore.
I can pick up on that. So the stipends are actually built into the America Volunteer model. And in our organization, Public Allies, we're at Public Allies on all of the social media. outlets at Public Allies DC. And we are looking for AmeriCorps members who will join us in the fall. We also look for great organizations like DC Central Kitchen and Bread for the City and Martha's Table, who've hosted allies in the past. And we also look for mentors, and we look for people who join us in the work around how do we ensure that community leaders and spaces of leadership are reflective of people who are from local communities. So we'd love to engage, even with ways that I haven't named that you think of that might be interested.
Okay, Mr. Rold, that was our final question. Are we about to move into the next portion of our programming this afternoon?
Yes, that was the final question. Thank you to a great panel, to all our panelists, a great panelists. Unfortunately, Dr. T had to drop off, but thank you all again for being a part of this great conversation and great discussion.
All right. Before I bounce, just want to say thank you to Director Squire for this awesome event. I mean, for it to be virtual, I mean, the face-to-face with it, I mean, this is amazing. Thank you for the invite to be a part of it. Shout out to my good friend, Glenn Ogilvy. Just really quick before I roll, I want to let individuals know, because everyone pretty much knows me from the radio and television, my community work and what I've been doing to serve vulnerable communities in the city is the bulk of what I do now. I'm currently contracted by our mayor and DYRS with DC Youth and Rehabilitative Services for the Academy DC, teaching music production, art, music video production through my DYRS contract. I do have another one on the federal level with the CSOSA DC that works with returning citizens, people 18 to 35 for the same thing. Also contracted by the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. I produced a shadowing program for returning citizens. I have a film coming out, a short film about the challenges of reentry for returning citizens. All this stuff is on my Instagram. And then I also have a contract in conjunction with Glenn Ogilvy and the Center for Nonprofit for Safe Passage for 3 schools in Washington, D.C., in Southwest. And we're also implementing after-school programs in those 3 schools to teach youth how to produce digital media content based on reducing violence in Washington, D.C. So that's a little bit about what we got going on over here with Creative Solutions for Youth. And you have all my information in the chat. If there's anything that I can do to be able to be of service, please let me know, and thank you.
Powerful stuff. We thank you, Easy.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We are going to move on. A part of this Serve 202 is not just this dynamic conversation and discussions that we just had, but we also want to give you resources, right? We want you to leave with your bag full, with your, you have a cannon of opportunities and things to really excite you to move to the next level with whatever your journey is in recruiting volunteers. And so we really wanted to highlight some of our funding that is available, and this could be within the executive office of the mayor, and also just out there, within multi-sector partners with our philanthropic community and likewise. So we're going to share a few more of our funding highlights, and then last but not least, and I know Easy talked about this, we will get to highlighting a few of our rock star, amazing African-American volunteers who have really been serving in amazing capacities throughout our city. So I'll turn it back over to Rold.
Right. So some of our current funding that we have, currently we have the FY 22-23 AmeriCorps State Formula Grant. That is, you can find on our MOCA website and our clearinghouse and in our funding alert. We have the Goldman Sachs Black Women Impact Grant that's also part of our funding alert. And then the Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women FY 22 grants for outreach and service to underserved populations is also out now. So upcoming funding opportunities. So we have our volunteer generation fund. So this part of this great conversation on volunteerism, this is definitely a grant that if your nonprofit is looking for ways to, do things around volunteerism, this is a great grant to go out for. Then we also have our MOCA community grants. They'll be coming out in April. You can find more information on our MOCA website. Some of the previous RFAs are up there, so if you're looking for if you're planning on applying, you could go on there and see what the applications have been in the past, and the applications don't tend to change, so this will give you a good head start on when you try to apply. And some just resources. Again, we have our Serve DC funding alert that comes out on a close to bi-weekly cadence, where we have different funding opportunities that we're highlighting on there. And then we also have the DC Bar Pro Bono Center. They are hosting a new advanced boot camp for nonprofits and board members. So as we spoke about today in this conversation, board members, we want to get our representation in the board. So this is on the board members. So this is a good opportunity for that. And then I will be turning it back over to Chief Service Officer.
All right, thank you so much, Rode. Again, thank you for joining us today. We had a really great participant. I'm looking now, our participants, you all have been so active and so engaged. Again, thank you to our panelists. Let's take a moment just to say thank you. I knew it was going to be great, but I could not anticipate the level and the intentionality around the voices and the insight and the expertise that we would hear. So thank you so much to each of you for being with us today and for what you do even outside of this, kind of convening, the work that you're doing. Again, everyone, encouraging everyone, please stay connected. We are here, Serve DC. We take a lot of value in holding these types of convenings so that we can be more informed and more connected. So thank you so much. And now we will be, this is exciting part of our program. I am a big proponent of recognizing volunteers, and I want them to know that we are feeling their efforts and their sacrifice, and we know how valuable they are to what we do here at Serve, but also to our residents within the district and the change that we want to see. So we are going to highlight two of our volunteers. We thought that would be a good thing to talk about, a young person that is in service and then a seasoned individual that is in service. And we've seen it, and I have the great honor of witnessing so much happening through service and so many of our volunteers showing up for us at all of our activations. But we just want to take a moment for this Black History Month to honor two of them. All right, and we'll go to the first. And that is Miss Ruth Ann Richardson. I put your whole name out there, Miss Ruth. I hope that she is with us today. She is a person that I met and had the honor of meeting through one of our COVID testing kit activations. And if you meet Miss Ruth, she meets you first. Her presence, her grace, her beauty meets you first. And she showed up, I want to say, and if she's here, she can certainly chime in, at least 5 days. I want to say that she was there day after day. She would come back. And this was really, in terms of timing, this was unprecedented times, right? And so we were calling on volunteers to really show up with moments notice to help us to really address something that is really crucial within our community, and that is staying safe in response to COVID-19 and creating safety tools so that our neighbors could be safe. And so she showed up. She's a warm presence. She was collaborative. And so in learning more about Miss Ruth Ann and knowing that she is a patient care technician at one of our DCPS schools, Kramer Middle School in Southeast, it's no wonder, right? She screens over 200 students, including DC Public Schools staff and visitors and other vendors in the building during business hours. Her screening and rapid test efforts resulted in no one contracting COVID-19 in the DCPS school in which she serves. Because of her reputation to make sure everyone is safe, she enjoys meeting new people. Ruth Ann sought out to volunteer with Serve DC. And so we just want to take a moment to say thank you, to recognize you for who you are and your professional capacity, who you are as a mother and a grandmother. We had that conversation, and who you are within our community, and say thank you for serving with fidelity and so much care. So I would just want to give a round of applause, if we can show our love in a virtual way, to say thank you to Miss Ruth Ann Richardson for being a part of our DC values and really showing us and leading the way through service.
Can we post her on Instagram, please? Put her on your page. I want to meet this lady. Make sure you put her on the Instagram and tag me, and I'm gonna shout her out on the radio.
We should. Okay, yes. Let's make sure we get a screenshot and we are able to do that. Thank you so much, Miss Ruth. She's just a guiding light. She's always encouraging me, and so we're so grateful for her service.
Incredible.
And then the next person that we're going to highlight is Miss Brittany Nelson, who is showing up in our community in a very similarly styled way, meaning she is taking what is near and dear to her and making sure that her community is better off for it. Miss Nelson is employed by the Addison Group, is a leading professional service firm, and she is a specialist supporting IT and engineering operations. And so she, in her official capacity, each year at the Addison Group, they have Volunteer Week, which is a week-long initiative where her team members come together to perform various acts of service surrounding communities. This year, Miss Nelson, Brittany Nelson, extended the opportunity to determine and organize the community event. And so she chose to lead a community cleanup of the Marvin Gaye Park. The park, located in Northeast Washington, D.C., is adjacent to the Lincoln Heights neighborhood. And for decades, Lincoln Heights has suffered the stigma of being violent and impoverished. And that's something that she wanted to change the narrative of. And so she did it through service. She, and along with her coworkers, organized the Marvin Gaye Park cleanup, and making a difference one act at a time. We are so grateful for your leadership, for your insight, for just serving with fidelity. Again, thank you so much to the Addison Group, but thank you to also Miss Nelson. When we talk about, how do we get others involved, it's that representation. You're leading the way within your organization to make sure that we have safe and clean neighborhoods, that our kids have clean and accessible places to live and play. So thank you so much for your service, Miss Nelson.
Send me her name too.
Okay.
All that.
Easy. We will. Thank you so much. This part was really special to us. So thank you for being here with us. In closing, I'm going to keep it short. We're good with time, but I just want to say again, gratitude. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for all that you are doing within our community. I'm a third generation Washingtonian, so this work is very important to me. It's something that I center, it's something that wakes me up in the middle of the night and guides me every day. I'm so proud to raise my two children here within the district, and everything that we are doing is ensuring that a new generation of young people can live and thrive within our city. And so I want to say thank you. I know that there's, a lot of things that we don't see, especially those of us who are on the ground that are doing the work. There's, things that you're getting at the last minute at the stores, and things that are on your mind when you could be thinking about things that are just near to you, that we do in the spirit of service, in the spirit of community. So I just want to say how grateful we are to have you with us today. I also want to say thank you to our mayor for her vision, for her support, for her prioritizing community in this way through this office, and also to Jackie Reyes, our director of the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs. Thank you for her leadership, and all of our sister organizations and offices that do this work within community. Please stay connected with us. I know that my team has been dropping. We have our formula, our AmeriCorps formula info session that is happening again today at 2 p.m. We would love for you to join us. One of the investments that I'm very proud in that space is that we have added our gun violence prevention, which is again really important here in our city. We have added that to one of our mayoral focus areas for our formula funding. So we are encouraging those organizations that address gun violence directly or indirectly to please check out the info session and consider joining us and consider applying for our AmeriCorps as we talk about increasing capacity. I also want to engage you and encourage you to stay connected with us via social media. I know that the team dropped our volunteer and donations portal. If you have volunteer opportunities, we encourage you to definitely put them on our portal. We know that our residents like Ruth Ann are looking at the portal and looking for things to do to be able to serve within our community. So that is how you are able to do that. And then also, as Rold mentioned, we have our funding alert. Please join our listserv. And then we also have our emergency preparedness work that we do, including our CERT program. So we would encourage you to learn more about that through our website and through our publications. Again, thank you so much for being here with us today. This has been a true pleasure. Thank you to Glenn and the Center for Nonprofit Advancement for your partnership. These are really fun to do because we're doing it with great people. Thank you. Stay connected. And we will see you at our next session 3 of Serve 202.
Awesome.
And you can also find us. It will be posted on our Facebook and YouTube pages. So please be sure to share it. This is a great conversation. For those that weren't able to attend, please share this information with them.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care, y'all. Be well.
All right. Be well.
Have a good one. Thank y'all.
Bye-bye.